So we're going to take a minute, guys, and just talk about installment sale agreements and contract for deeds and the differences a little bit between those. So hope you find the video helpful. If you do, take a minute and like the video. Don't forget to join our YouTube channel as well, and don't forget to make any comments below. Keep in mind we're going to have a drawing on the comments as well on all of our videos, and pick that one lucky person to have a phone call with me to go over your real estate transaction or situation you might be in. So let's jump right into installment sales agreements and contract for deeds. Now, contract for deeds are called executory contracts globally. And based on the state where you are, they could be called an agreement for sale. They could be a land contract or a contract for deed, or gosh only knows what else they could be called. But there's executory contracts, and an installment sales contract is also an executory contract. But the difference between an installment sales contract and a contract for deed is really, one is more entailed to personal property, one is more relevant to real property. And this becomes important, especially if you're dealing in the manufactured or mobile home industry along the way. Now, if you're going to play with contract for deeds, you got to be very cautious in how you do that, especially here in Texas, because there are many rules and regulations about those. If you're going to buy a home as an investor, non-owner occupied, it's okay to do a contract for deed. No issues, no problem at all. It's contract law. However, if you're going to sell a home to a owner occupant, you better learn what Chapter 5 of the Texas Property Code says, because in many cases you may be prohibited from utilizing a contract for deed. And so, talking about a contract for deed, a land contract, an agreement for sale, these documents can be fully executed, recorded. The purchaser of the property can be paying principal, interest, taxes, insurance, things like that along the way. They're usually very detailed in the overall transaction. But the bottom line of an executory contract, contract for deed, is that it says when you pay me 100 installments of $1,000, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to give you the deed to the house. Now, at least here in Texas, and I can't comment on other states, and a contract for deed provides what is called equitable title to the property. And there are various levels of ownership. You have full legal ownership, which is what a deed conveys. That deed could be a general warranty deed, special warranty deed. It says you actually own the property. Now, a contract for deed gives you something less than full title. It gives you what is called equitable title, meaning you have a greater interest than being, let's say, a tenant in the property, but you also don't have full ownership interest of the transaction, at least not until you've made your last installment and you get it done. Now, whenever you utilize a contract for deed, land contract, you want to try to get those recorded of record for your protection to memorialize that transaction. You want to make sure that you are dealing with the right people, because I want you to think about this. If you're doing a longer term executory contract out there where you are hoping to get a deed in the future, what if your seller disappears on you? Things happen. What if they pass away? You have issues with heirs. How do you find them? Who's going to convey that ownership to you? So something to consider with a contract for deed might be having your mortgage document or mortgage documents executed and held in escrow by a third party. So when you have completed the terms of your transaction, you can go to that person, verify and validate you've done it, and that escrow agent, whoever it might be, is then authorized to record your deed, and in some cases record a mortgage. One thing I used to do years ago before they changed our laws here in Texas is I executed a contract for deed with a mortgage held in escrow. And of course, this was all in writing, embodied in the contract for deed, affirming and acknowledging same, so that we were able to hold and season this mortgage. And once the borrower met certain obligations, which might have been 12, 24, 36 months of payments on time, maybe they were doing some repairs to the property, whatever those obligations might be, we were then obligated to go ahead and record those executed documents. And of course, we would hold the originals in an escrow account. our borrower would have a copy of those. So you protected all the parties involved. Now, I do think one thing that's so important with the contract for deed, guys, is I want to make sure that that borrower has insurance in their name whenever possible. You don't have to do that, especially if you have an existing mortgage on the property. It would allow you as the seller to keep the insurance in place without transferring it to the borrower. But you may want to consider letting that borrower get insurance for their added protection, because we have seen issues where investors will collect insurance proceeds, not repair the property to the detriment of their borrower. And that was really problematic here in Texas some 20 years ago, which is what really implemented some of the changes in our rules and regulations. So always try to protect that borrower under a contract for deed the best you can. It also helps to market it that way, as you're giving them more than just a contract. You're letting them have insurance in their name and things of that nature along the way. So let's skip over for a minute and talk about installment sale agreements, which says pretty much the same thing as a contract for deed does. When you make 1,000 payments of $100 each, and this might go to that, 100 payments of $1,000 each, I'll give you the title to this manufactured home, this mobile home. And this is assuming that that mobile home is still personal property. It has not been converted to real property. That's when you go to the advent of the contract for deed at that point in time, as opposed to the installment sales agreement. So the installment sales agreement, just like the contract for deed, also gives you the ability to set up default terms and provisions. I've seen them set up where it's handled just like a rental property. Payments are due on the 1st, they're late in the 5th, and if you haven't paid, they can terminate that contract or that installment sales agreement either immediately or after a 5-day notice, or maybe a 10-day notice, or something that you've pre-negotiated with your borrower along the way. What's important about that is it's easier to navigate than, let's say, a foreclosure, or it's easier to navigate than a lawsuit of some type that is out there. And it just gives added protection to the seller or the investor who is selling this property to give you more control over a borrower who may default. Now, oftentimes with these executory contracts, whether it's an installment sales agreement or a contract for deed, besides having some easier notice provisions, if your borrower doesn't vacate upon giving them proper notice, you're still going to go through the eviction process. And obviously, I think a court's going to want to see a copy of your documents, a copy of your notices, where you did things properly and correctly to terminate these along the way, so that they understand that you followed proper procedure out there. But there's just no way to terminate a contract or an installment sales agreement and not have to remove somebody unless they vacate voluntarily out there. Now, in the mobile home industry also, I have found that I like the installment sales agreement over a full conveyance and carrying back a note on the property and filing what's called a UCC lien, because if I did that, it is going to exacerbate my time frame, require possibly the filing of a lawsuit to get permission to foreclose and take this mobile home back. And that's one of the things I want to prevent. So of course, in whatever state you're in, you want to know what your rules and regulations are for contract for deeds, executory contracts, when buying and or selling a home, especially when a consumer is involved. You also want to take a moment and what the rules and regulations are for an installment sales agreement versus the full conveyance of ownership of, let's say, a mobile home or a manufactured home to a third party out there. All of these documents serve a purpose at the right time. You want to be thoughtful in how you put these together. Understand that you may not get the same amount of money you would get for the full sale of a property. Let's say you're going to do a wraparound mortgage, for instance, because you're conveying full title of the property to a buyer at that point. You may very well get a much larger down payment versus by just having a contract for deed out there per se, because you're not giving your buyer full ownership of the property. But it does give you as the seller more control, which is, I think, very important. I think one of the big things that I have is our business is all about learning how to be a control freak, because you want to control your transaction. You don't want to wind up in a courtroom if you can avoid that. You don't want to wind up with a long, drawn-out process to regain the ownership of your property in the event of a default. So take the time, ask the knowledgeable attorneys in your state about installment sales contracts, contract for deeds, land contracts, etc., how they work in each particular instance, and it will help you navigate your transactions, whether you're in the real property world or over in the personal property or chattel world, as we sometimes call it, as well. So guys, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, take a minute and like it. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and make any comments you might have along the way as well. Now remember, on those comments, we're going to have a drawing off all of our videos coming up for our next winner to have that consultation with me to go over your real estate transaction you're working on, whether you're buying, selling, or whatever else it might be. I look forward to having you be that winner to help you guys out.